Hi folks, Mark Allen here for BHSpringSolutions and BH Defense, and today's subject is personal security, school security, home security, the traits that all of these things have in common, the foundational supports of effectively avoiding and defending threats, whether that be in your personal life, in our schools, in our homes. Last year in 2017, I finished a book. It's called Before It's Too Late, Get Your Defensive House in Order. And I wrote this book. I started writing it for one reason. I ended up writing it about somewhat of a different motive after I started doing a lot of research into statistics and started seeing some things that seemed to me to be a little different than what we hear in the news, what we hear from the two different political football players on the whole gun debate, and what the gun control crowd now calls gun safety, and these two political football players that keep tossing the same political football back and forth across the net. This is maintaining the status quo, and the status quo is a really big problem because every morning now of my life I get up, we turn on the morning news. While we're drinking coffee, there's never a question, was there someone in Indianapolis shot and killed last night? The question is, what's the body count this morning? And folks, that is disturbing. We have a national crisis on our hands. No matter what the two political football players are saying about crime statistics, statistics tell us that over 250,000 firearms are going from the law-abiding to the non-law-abiding every year by theft. They're stolen or they're lost, and in some cases the staggering number that are lost and stolen from FFLs. We have gotten to a place of crisis today, and I believe that it is because of a loss of mindsets and a loss of foundations in our society, and especially among our gun owners, that we've got to fix. We've got to have a shift. We've got to make a shift. These two political football players, and by the way, I'm running for no political office, and I'm not making this video on any kind of a thought that I'm going to get rich. I had a stepson in a school this past year. My wife worked in a school this past year. This became my business because of that, because of some of the tragedies that we have seen happen in our schools, because some of the tragedies that we've seen happen in our society, and that it became somewhat my business at that point. The book, Before It's Too Late, Get Your Defensive House in Order, was not written specifically about the school safety issue. However, the foundations in it can be used by our schools today, and they will be effective. Let me share with you a headline. Two 13-year-olds without their parents walk into a gun store, both purchase semi-automatic shotguns and ammunition, and ride away on their bicycles. Can you believe that? That's not a real news headline. That is a very long title to one of the chapters in this book that I wrote. And that story, that headline, is about my father. In 1953, he and a friend of his, with money they made carrying the daily newspaper, walked into a local gun store in Indianapolis. They both purchased Browning Auto 5 16-gauge shotguns and ammunition, and went rabbit hunting later that afternoon and rode away on their bicycles. And nobody thought anything about this. Now, let me finish the story. That day, when my father bought his Browning Auto 5 shotgun, he traded in a Mossberg bolt-action shotgun that he purchased at the same gun store when he was 12. Folks, I am not advocating that we should have 13 and 12-year-olds buying firearms today in our gun stores. That, frankly, is unthinkable in my head, because we don't possess today the same mindsets and foundations that made that a safe thing to do in 1953. Folks, we have to open our minds. We are the adults, and we have to start thinking this thing deeper. We've got to start thinking in more sophisticated ways about our security and our safety issues in the United States of America. We've got to do this because we've gotten to the point where nobody has the answer. Neither of the two political football players, the people ought to have their guns taken away, and you're not taking my damn guns, and they keep pitching this across the net, and nothing changes, and the status quo stays the same. The short reason is both of these political football players run a money machine. And the money flows when these two political football players toss it back and forth, and nothing changes, and we are the ones who are getting to deal with this problem, and now the problem is ours to solve. And it must be solved, because now it affects our children, it affects our schools, some of the most sacred things in our society, in our country. That's where this loss of some of these mindsets and foundations that apparently existed in 1953. I don't know, I wasn't there. But I do know the stories, and I know that they're true. My father today still owns that same Browning Auto 5 shotgun. It is a work of art. It is beautiful. And he claims that he has shot a boxcar load of shotgun shells through that firearm, and it's gorgeous. 13-year-olds were taking good care safely with these kinds of tools in 1953. We've lost a lot. We think we've evolved. We pretend we've evolved. In some ways we have not evolved, and now we've got to start to discover what those ways are. That is what Before It's Too Late, Get Your Defensive House in Order is all about. This is a book for law enforcement, for schools, and for everyone who does not outsource their personal security or their home security or the security of their families. This book is for you. In the mindsets in this book go deeper. And here's an example of where they go. Today in our world, when we look at our school security, our personal security, our home security, we have two simultaneous issues. That is, one, preventing and avoiding an attack when we can prevent it, when we can avoid it, and defending an attack if it happens. We must think these two things simultaneously and virtually equally. We can't go buying bulletproof windows and have no plan to defend these children better than adults throwing their bodies in front of bullets. We've got to get more sophisticated about this. In terms of avoiding, in terms of preventing, I've been stunned in the first 6 months of this year as I have talked to politicians, law enforcement folks, and school administrators in charge of security, and I have explained to them, do you remember when we were in school, you knew the kids with the cigarettes, you knew the kids that had speed or whatever it was. Do you remember how there was a kid's world and there was an adult world? And you knew who had smokes? I did too. Did you rat them out? No, I didn't either. None of us did, virtually. Today I talked to my stepson and I explained this to him. He goes, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. All the kids, you know, I know who has electronic cigarettes and uses them in the bathroom. Of course, this hasn't changed. This world exists as two worlds. There's the kids' world, which is much deeper today because of social media and because of the invention of the cell phone than when we were in school. And we have the adults' world, and the adults' world is worried about what time you have to be at school and how you can dress and if it's too short or long or down or up or whatever it is. Insignificant things to our security and safety of these children. What this book talks about is anticipating the threats, what it means to anticipate threats and avoid them if it's possible. In terms of our school security, we've got to bridge this gap with our children. We've got to explain to them, we know there's two worlds existing here, but there's one thing that we have got to get unified on. If we can't get unified on who's got the electronic cigarettes in school and whatever it is that, you know, you can't have your clothes this much or that far or whatever, we may still continue to exist in these two worlds, but we've got to come together when it comes to intelligence of what is going on with students who are maybe on the fringe, maybe in trouble, and then we adults have got to listen and we've got to react. No more can we be in this fog of our adult responsibilities, not paying attention, being clueless about what's going on in this other world until it explodes in our face. We've got to get the communication between the adults and the children bridged. The children get this. Believe it or not, it's the adults, it's the police officers, the school administrators, and the politicians who don't get it consistently. They're talking about magazine capacity limitations, and it's bullshit. Total bullshit. Nobody knows if that's ever going to stop one shooting. But everybody knows now. Everybody knows. When these things keep happening in our schools and it is a student who is responsible for the action, the other children are not surprised. We've got to get tuned in. And folks, I'm talking to you, the adults. You've got to make the first step. We have to make the first step to start talking with these children and get them to come toward us. And they will. They're scared, for God's sakes. They want this to stop. They will come towards people they can trust. They will start sharing information, and when they share information, we as adults have got to react to it. There's another thing that's missing in all these things that are happening in our country today. Where are the toxicology reports of these perpetrators? The thing in Las Vegas, the thing that happened in Florida, and just here 20 miles from my own home in Noblesville, Indiana, where a brave school teacher stopped a 13-year-old who decided to start shooting firearms inside the school. Where are the toxicology reports on these people? Why is our media ignoring it? Why isn't it newsworthy? We need to know as a society what is running through these people's blood, and the fact that we don't seem to have any way to get that information would stand to reason. We need that information. We need to start knowing. We need to stop listening so much to these two political football players who both have a financial interest in keeping the political football tossed back and forth. We need to take the guns. You're not taking my damn guns. And that has got to stop. It is maintaining the status quo, and it's keeping everything just like it is. And the reason is because both of these sides are money machines. The money flows to them every time they make a noise and pitch it back and forth. We've got to be the adults in this situation, and where we can avoid and stop in advance these things happening to our children, to ourselves, to our homes, in our schools, we've got to commit to stopping it, and we've got to commit to start existing in a unified way with these teenagers. And we've got to start listening to the intelligence that they have, and we've got to start paying attention, and we've got to start stopping these things before they happen more often. And when they do happen, we have to have a plan to defend. In the last 6 months of this school year, my wife, who worked in a school, my stepson, who attended a school, the same school, they had tactical flashlights with them. Why? Because a tactical flashlight shined in the eyes of a perpetrator just the way you just saw it. Momentarily disrupts the vision capabilities of that person. It's like this magic button. They had those with them in the schools in case something happened, in case they needed a way to create what we call portable concealment. If a perpetrator can't look through this, he can't see me. I am in essence concealed. I may be in the wide open. We have to start thinking about the technologies we have available, like tactical flashlights, in a way that gives the people in our schools the opportunity to defend, to create an event that is not what the attacker expects. That's the first fundamental of defending, is you got to do something that this attacker is not expecting to happen. It scrambles the circuitry, maybe long enough. In the case of Florida, can you imagine if that kid going through the school and shooting up and killing people, if he had lost his eyesight for 15 seconds? Can you imagine? My goodness, my theory is the kids would have probably taken him out and solved that problem if that could have happened, and there would be people among us today that are now dead. We've got to start thinking this thing deeper. We've got to think it in a more sophisticated way. But above all, we've got to start understanding the mindsets, the fundamentals, and the foundations that existed in a day when it was no problem, no safety issue, and nobody died, when 13-year-olds and 12-year-olds bought shotguns. And we didn't need laws that kept someone from doing that until they're 18 or 21. Folks, we've got to open our minds past the political bullshit. We've got to start thinking this thing deeper, and together I'm convinced that we can make a huge difference in this problem. But we've got to start understanding this problem deeper. BHSpringSolutions.com. Click on ebook, and you will have immediately the download for Before It's Too Late, Get Your Defensive House in Order. It comes with a money-back guarantee. If you don't agree that this information is far more beneficial, multiple times more than the small amount that it costs just to have this information, we'll refund you, no problem. We want you to have it. We want you to be thinking about upping your own security. But folks, today we need leaders with respect to this school safety and this school security issue. We need you. We need everybody to step up. And it doesn't take a political movement. It doesn't take an organization. It takes adults understanding what adulthood looked like when adults were adults. And I'm sad to say it, in 2018, there's too much of a component in this picture where adults are not acting like adults. It's time for us to get our house in order as adults. And I invite you to do that. I invite you to look at that in this book. And I do appreciate you listening to this information on video. I'm Mark Allen, BH Spring Solutions and BH Defense.